Russian MilBloggers are going into full cope mode because the Russian military is getting ratioed, not on Twitter, but in the ratio of FPV drones. Ukraine is dominating Russian forces, and it is causing a lot of problems. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's break down this story. Okay, so this is actually coming to us from the Institute for the Study of War, and that some Russian military commentators, right, are openly complaining about the fact that Ukrainian drone and electronic warfare capabilities are head and shoulders above those of Russia. And this is interesting for a whole bunch of reasons. But first off, the fact that MilBloggers are back to criticizing the Russian MOD is itself very interesting. You might remember that many of the prominent anti-establishment voices in the Russian MilBlogger space, like Igor Girkin, who's now in jail, and Prigozhin, who is now dead, have been silenced or co-opted, right? Many of the other critical MilBloggers actually were brought into the Kremlin, quite literally, given sort of low stakes, highly paid appointments to make sure that they stay on message for the Kremlin. But a new generation of MilBloggers has emerged and is leveling criticisms at the Kremlin, right? This particular MilBlogger is a former Storm Z instructor, who details what they describe as one of the leading factor in Ukraine's ability to repel Russian attacks. And that is FPV drones. He said, first off, Ukraine has a numerical advantage in FPV drones and drone operators. Ukrainian assault groups have around 3 to 4 FPV drones for every one drone used by Russian assault groups. So while Russian assault groups can literally fire a single drone to sort of get Ukrainian heads down, the Ukrainians can use 3 to 4. And the difference can be pretty tremendous, right? If you know and you're in position that the Russians assault, they usually throw one FPV drone, you know that if that drone has already hit, that you don't have to worry about it again. But if you think your enemy has 3 to 4, one FPV drone, you have to be on the alert because you know that more could be coming, right? Ukrainian mechanized groups have an even larger advantage with almost up to 10 times the FPV drones of a comparable Russian mechanized assault group. And again, if you've seen how Ukrainians use these, you know that this is a game changer for them, right? Because when Ukrainian mechanized assault groups are on the defensive, they use these FPV drones to cripple attacking Russian tanks, but also to clean up, so to speak. So oftentimes you'll see a Russian mechanized assault group get the lead tank and the trail tank destroyed. They'll be stuck on the road, unable to maneuver because of minefields. And then the FPV drones will go onto the battlefield. They'll target the weak points of the now stuck vehicles, or they'll target the light infantry forces that have basically fled these vehicles and are attempting to continue their mission on foot. So Ukraine, this MilBlogger points out, also has a superior organization, a force structure for drones, right? The drone units are centralized, right? So they're not just, they have a blend of specialization and centralization, but are integrated into the ground units. So you'll have a drone company in a Ukrainian ground battalion, for example. And this means that Ukrainian forces can integrate their reconnaissance and attack capabilities into a pretty low level of maneuver. Again, if you're a company, okay, so it's hard to explain if you haven't been in the military, but the basic way it works is assets are held at different echelons. So when I was in Afghanistan, again in 2010, if I wanted a reconnaissance drone, right, it was basically a Shadow. We had one sort of prototype of a handheld drone, but you wanted a Shadow. Well, the Shadows were controlled by the brigade headquarters because there were so few. There was only like 3 for the whole brigade. So you had to ask brigade for this asset, and your voice saying, hey, send the 116th MPs, their first platoon needs a drone for their mission. Well, in a brigade, there's literally 50 other platoons of maneuver forces that are asking for the same asset. So brigade has to pick and choose where it's going to send this. But not only that, the process, the higher the echelon you go, the harder the process is. So I had to submit a CONOP, right, for how I wanted to use the drone. That CONOP had to be approved to the brigade level, which meant literally, no kidding, it had to be reviewed by lawyers to make sure we weren't planning on committing a war crime. It had to be reviewed by the chaplain to make sure that I wasn't going to desecrate a holy site. It had to be reviewed by every operational commander. It had to be reviewed by the S2, the Intel, or the G2 or whatever it was, to make sure I wasn't doing some other crazy, make sure I was gathering intelligence in the way they wanted. It took forever. It was an unbelievable amount of work to get those things approved. And that's what happens when assets are controlled at the brigade level. In contrast, company level assets were very easy. I knocked on my commander's door. I said, "Sir, we're going on patrol tomorrow. I'd really love to get the Raven operator or the human team or the such and such." And he'd go, "Hey, Mike, you free to help first platoon tomorrow?" The Raven operator would be like, "Yeah." They'd go, "Okay." We didn't use first names, but Sergeant Stuffy, you free to operate the Raven for first platoon tomorrow? They'd go, "Yeah." And that's it. That's how you get your asset. So having the Ukrainians having these drone units integrated really low into the ground unit echelons makes it way easier for them to sync up, right? They could literally, I imagine that a lot of Ukrainian maneuver units are probably on a first name basis with their drone operators, right? And so that means that in contrast, Russian forces don't have this kind of organization and integration. And Russian electronic warfare is a cut below the Ukrainians, right? Well, you guys know that if you were involved in the ongoing fundraiser for the Liu Brigade, the guys that are defending Vovchansk. I partner with Ukraine Aid Ops, and they're a 501c3. I'll actually throw the donation link up here because the fundraiser is still going on. But one of the key things that these guys need is actually electronic warfare and drone jammers and analyzers. It's the number one thing that you guys have helped them purchase. It's what they need the most. And it makes sense because if you have an analyzer that can analyze the frequency that Russian drones are operating on, then you can get the jammers calibrated, and the jammers can block those FPV drones from being effective. That's what we talk about when we talk about electronic warfare capabilities, right? And electronic reconnaissance. That's what the frequency analyzers are. So the fact is that, one, you guys, the viewers, are partly responsible for this. And Russia doesn't have this. They don't have the ability to get these electronic warfare and electronic reconnaissance capabilities, meaning that Ukrainian drones can operate freely. And it's not just this MilBlogger, right? Another MilBlogger, spurred on by this Storm Z instructor, noted that Ukrainian drone units have already destroyed unprotected Russian armored equipment in Avdiivka and inhibited Russian offensive prospects in the area. And we're going to take a look at just why this is such an effective part of the Ukrainian tactics. But first, if you haven't checked out Strike Gum, you should, right? 90 milligrams caffeine in every piece, 100 milligrams alpha GPC, 0 sugar. It's superior to an energy drink in every single way. You can get it on strikegum.com if you want the military discounts, the first-time customer discounts and all that. But if you're on Amazon and you just want it easy, you can go to Amazon, search for Strike Gum. We have the 5-pack now. So if you want that, if you want to try it, but you're like, I don't really want to ship just 1 pack of gum, the 5-pack's the way to go. And I appreciate all you guys that have left those 5-star reviews on Amazon because it helps tell the other Amazon customers that Strike Gum is the real deal. It's made in the USA, right, by Liquid Core, just down in Denver. We spent quite a bit of extra money on premium ingredients, natural caffeine, right, extracted from coffee beans, none of the weird lab-made encapsulated stuff. And you feel it in the taste. When you taste it and you chew it, you're like, damn, this is way better than the stuff that's made overseas, that's super dehydrated. You know, it's just a cut above. And so thank you guys for helping get the word out. All right, so check us out, Amazon or strikegum.com. Okay, so here's what I thought was also interesting, is that Ukraine, for these drone attacks to really be effective, they need Russians to come out of their trenches, right? It's hard for these drones to really, fuck up a target when they're entrenched. That's why we're seeing Russia continue to advance, because it's necessary for them to advance in order to inflict the target casualties that Ukraine wants to. You can see here in Rubtina, right, where Russian forces have advanced, certainly, but they've advanced where? Across low-value terrain, right? We know that in the south, terrain is flat, it's very open, it's brutal if you are on the attack. And by keeping the Russians on the offensive, they are ensuring that they can continue to have lots of create a target-rich environment for their drones. Imagine you're a drone operator and you watch a whole trench of Russians clear out and start to charge across an open field. You'd be like, this is a shooting gallery. And it is, right? And that's why you're seeing this kind of elastic or defense in depth. As I've pointed out, this salient, there's no reason for Ukraine to hold it, and they're going to be slowly withdrawing from it. Yeah, you're just going to see it, right? Because now that the counteroffensive is over, the hope was that this would be like the site of a breakthrough, and it just wasn't. All right, but you can see the other places that Russia's achieved advances are areas that aren't actually that helpful, right? You can see here, right, this empty space between Pobieda and Pereskokivka. And you can see this is just Russian forces. Again, some Russian conscript had to charge across this open field. Like, people are like, no, the Russians don't do that. Dude, how else do you think they seized from this windbreak to this windbreak? They didn't tunnel underneath it. They had to come out, and they took a lot of casualties. And as you can see, they seized nothing of value. They seized a razor-thin windbreak. That's the closest thing to a tactical objective they achieved, right? They also may have seized some remainder of Pobieda, but I sort of suspect they held Pobieda before. But again, Pobieda, like, there's nothing left of this town, FYI. Like, there's literally nothing left of it. So this is all just like valueless open terrain. And then, right, you see the same thing in Novo-Alexandrivka. Now, okay, all credit where credit's due. The Russian advance into Novo-Alexandrivka is tactically significant. You can see they've achieved a foothold inside the town, or whatever's left of the town. That's meaningful. Like, credit where credit's due. Sometimes the Russians do achieve actual objectives. But you can see in the process, they also had to seize, cross a lot of open ground and incur a lot of casualties. And that's central to making these drones work. They do their best when Russian forces are on the advance. So the Ukrainians have an incentive to actually keep the Russians advancing. And the Russians, in turn, who use square kilometers seized as their metric for success, are going to keep doing it because they believe they're succeeding. This is kind of the preposterousness we're in right now, where Ukrainians say they're winning by exterminating lots of Russians, and the Russians believe they're winning because they're seizing more and more territory. So overall, it is a strange and complex war for sure. But anyway, that's all I had. Thanks to the Colonel tier members. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. It does help. Hit like on the video. That also helps. And a huge thank you to all the Lieutenant and Colonel tier members. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.